from Publisher Weekly here in La Feria del Libro in Madrid. In this new edition, we have the honor to have you with us in this interview. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be here, thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about your new book that you are going to be introducing to us. Can you give us a sum up or just give us some key points to you?
Yeah, the English title is All the Broken Places, and it's a sequel of sorts to The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas. People who've read that book will remember Gretel, who was the 12-year-old sister of Bruno in that story. But I returned to her, but as an adult, at the end of her life. She's 91 years old, and she's dealing with the history of her family, the shame, the level of guilt and complicity that she feels. And she's looking back over those years, and we kind of follow her story through quite a few decades and different parts of the world where she's been, and just seeing who she became and how the effect of the Holocaust had on her.
And you always thought about doing a second part of the book because this book came out, like we were talking off camera quite some years ago.
Yeah.
You always thought about making this second part?
Yeah, I did. When I finished the first draft of Striped Pyjamas, I already knew that I would return to it at some point, but I wanted to wait until I was much older. And actually, for a long time, I thought I would write it myself when I was like in my 80s or 90s, if maybe it would be my last book. But I wrote it during the pandemic, and the reason I chose to write it now really was that Gretel, or somebody like Gretel, could still be alive today. She would be 91. Whereas if I wrote it in 30 years' time, obviously that wouldn't be possible, and it would be a historical novel completely. And even though parts of the novel are historical, I wanted to keep a section of it contemporary. So it just felt like the right time now.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I want to ask you. The mythology that you use, the mythology, like your history occurs about the things, about history, that is the Second World War and the Holocaust. How do you came through that, and how do you study for making that in your book?
Well, it's a subject that I've been interested in since I was a teenager. Really, I started reading about it then, I don't like to think of it as sort of as research, I just like to think of it as just educating myself on it. So when I came to write Striped Pyjamas, I was in my early 30s, and I had been, studying this subject for about 15, 16 years, just as a reader. And then in all the years since, of course, I doubt a day has gone by where I haven't talked about that book in one way or another with somebody. And so it's become part of my, even though it's not part of my personal experience of life or my family history, it's a subject that that has been a big part of my reading, and I think I'm pretty, educated on it. It's shown up even in other books I've written without sort of my intending to sometimes. It seems to kind of find its way in.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the characters. Do you still love them or do you still hate them? Because some kind of authors don't like the characters after so many years that they want to change things out. I don't know if that's applied in this case, or you fell in love with them with the time.
I still no. I mean, I don't know if I either love them or hate them. But the characters in Striped Pyjamas obviously are, most of them are quite horrendous. Other than Bruno and Shmuel. But I think the author has to care about the characters in some way. It has to make them authentic. And even with a bad character like Bruno's father, you have to find some way to write it that isn't just writing a cliched kind of monster. So in that case, seeing it from Bruno's point of view, a little boy who loves his father, who doesn't actually know what his father is doing. I think it gave it a sort of an element to the book that is surprising. And I think the writer has to do that, rather other than that, it just becomes, very cliche written.
And you like this type of themes, or history themes? Well, you talk about it that you really enjoy reading about it, but you also have published other books during this time period in which you've published your first book and then this second part. Do you like these themes, or you rather prefer more social ones, that is the one that, for example, we have in one of the...
I do enjoy writing about history, I must admit, and I've written a lot of books that are set in the past, but then some are set contemporary. I always kind of just trust my instinct when I'm starting something. What do I feel is the right book to be writing now? The book I'm writing at the moment is set today, but my most recent book, of course, is set in the past. So I just generally go with that. But I like doing research. I like finding out how characters travelled and ate and dressed and spoke to each other and all that kind of thing. And I usually choose historical periods that I'm interested in, that I've read about anyway, so that I have some kind of background knowledge. For example, I wrote about the Russian Revolution in the House of Special Purpose, and I was always kind of interested in the downfall of the Tsars and things like that. So I enjoy that.
And what's the review that you have read or somebody has told you that you love the most about this new book?
I'm sorry, is it?
Review that has moved you the most? The review that you have like read or something has
I
told
don't
you?
read reviews.
Oh my god!
At all. I
okay.
never read reviews.
Wow.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I stopped reading reviews about 5 or 6 years ago. I just prefer not to. I think, for me, I find you know the value of your own work. You know whether, I could look at all my books lined up and say whether I achieved artistically what I set out to achieve in them. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes, you put your heart and soul into something and you just haven't got it the way you wanted it to. And over the course of a career and of a life, I think that's okay. But I prefer to leave it in my own head, whether I've achieved it or not. So, yeah, I just never read reviews.
Oh wow! And do you have any rituals for writing? Like you get a setup, or you got like kind of a book, and would you write your main ideas and what?
My only kind of real ritual is to try to write every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even Christmas Day. To just get a little bit down.
Yeah.
And I find if I do that, then the novel will always be moving forward by a page or two every day. I always sort of fear that if I walk away from a book, I'll lose it in some way. So the first draft I prefer to write at home in Dublin, but once I have that first draft written, I can take it on the road with me. Like here, I was sitting down last night at the hotel, doing a little bit of work on the next book, and it kind of relaxes me. I enjoy it. I'm still, like, all these years later, I still love the act of writing. I really enjoy it.
That's incredible. And what is like dealing with the fame that you have with your first book, and now with all the books that you have written, but now having the second one? How is that affecting your life right now?
It's nice because what it means is that, like, readers have come to the books, and I love traveling and, like, to come here to Madrid and spend a couple of hours signing. And it's the kind of thing that when I was a kid, I dreamed of. That not for the fame as such, but it's the fact that readers are actually interested in your books and they come up to you at the stall here and say how much they might have been moved by one of the books and how much it's affected them. And that's what you're doing it for. You don't want to feel like you're writing into a void. You want to feel that readers actually care about the book. So it's lovely.
And do you feel like social media is also having a pressure in your book in some type of aspects, like in these all things that are like history related and have the Holocaust and all those type of things? Some kind of cultures may kind of appear into the social media?
I do think there are a lot of kind of recurring themes in my books that get there not so much by design, but by sort of subconsciously. Like the idea of complicity seems to recur time and again. I tend to write a lot about not so much the like, say, monsters committing terrible acts as the people who allow those acts to happen. I certainly do that in the history of loneliness, which is about the child abuse scandals in Ireland in the church. And again, what I'm writing at the moment is, and the new book, Gretel is considering her own role during those times. So that's something that seems to kind of come up again and again. But I think for most writers, you don't sort of set out thinking, I'm going to constantly write about this particular topic. It's more that it sort of finds its way into the work.
And would you like to have like cinema adaptation also of this book, like you have in your first one? Would you like to?
Sure. If somebody wanted to do it, it's not, to me, it's not the most important thing. I've got quite a few books that are in various stages of development, and if that happens, that's lovely. But first and foremost, I'm a novelist, so the exciting thing for me is always, the day that the box arrives with the books in it, you hold it up and you think, yeah, this is what I did. So.
And just one last question: what's the last book that you read, and the one that you are going to be reading in the next, like, kind of couple of weeks, maybe?
Okay. Well, I'm currently reading a book called Trust by Hernan Diaz, which just won the Pulitzer Prize, which is set in New York at the start of the 20th century. I'm sort of halfway through that. I was reading it on the plane coming over. And what will I read next? There's a book called The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, an Irish writer who's a friend of mine, and that's coming out this week. In fact, I go back and I'm going to go to his book launch on Tuesday night, so that's when I'll read next probably.
Well, thank you so much to be with us today, and just have such great luck as you have in your first ones and in the ones that you have during your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you.